when it comes to writing a novel, at least any kind of novel that requires a lot of research, like historical fiction, or something set in another country, or something that involves a lot of technical details that you don't personally know about, there's really two ways to go about it. The first is you can meticulously do all your research and immerse yourself in the subject until you feel that you know everything you need to know, and never move on to write the next scene until you've got that information locked down. The other is where you just plow on ahead regardless and fill in the gaps later. I'm pretty sure you can guess which is my process. Now with this current manuscript, which is right now working under the title of Sudden Sun Discloses, I've written about half the story, and I'm now taking some time, as I said, to go back, do some research, and fill in the gaps. And there are several different kinds of gaps. A good example of the type of writing that I do during NaNoWriMo, or really any time I'm first drafting, is in this sentence, where our character is in the town of Port Union. Port Union's a really interesting place, by the way. You'll be hearing a lot more about it later, and during the summer I'm going to visit it and do a couple of vlogs from there. I'm writing about it because there's a part of the story set there. It's the only Union-built town in North America. It was the home and headquarters of Sir William Coker, founder of the Fishermen's Protective Union. And so that's the setting for part of my story, and it's the early days of Port Union when the story is set there, and I have an offhand comment by my character that the men of Port Union are involved in several projects. Now, I know from my sort of skimming research that Port Union had a lot of amenities that the average Newfoundland town didn't have at that time. It had a power plant, it had a hotel, it had a department store, it had a soft drink bottling plant, it had a movie theater. But I don't know when exactly all of these things were developed, and so in the actual sentence that I wrote, word for word, during NaNoWriMo, I mentioned some of the men of Port Union involved in various projects. They were building an X, they were planning a Y. X and Y, as in mathematics, are the unknowns, and I use them in a manuscript to stand in for anything I don't know or haven't decided yet. So a lot of characters are named Mr. X or Mrs. Y, and little facts like that. I don't know what they were building and planning at that particular time in the story. So it's a fairly simple matter to do as I did yesterday evening, go to the Center for Newfoundland Studies, go through a bunch of research and articles about Port Union, and find out what they were building and planning when, so I can fill in X and Y. That's the easy part. You run into a bigger kind of problem with a scene like I have in the book later on, a scene set in St. John's where one of my characters is going on a walk through Barring Park and watching a man rowing a boat on the pond with 3 small children in it. Lost in her own thoughts, she realizes the man in the boat is someone she knows. Great little scene, which I think is kind of key to my character development, and I thought it was neat to add in the fact that once upon a time you used to be able to rent rowboats and row them across the pond in Barring Park. But then I realized, and I realized this while I was writing it because I did a little quickie bit of research, that during the time I'm writing that scene, which is in 1893, Barring Park was still part of a private estate. It wasn't a public park yet, so the scene couldn't have happened there. So in this stage of research, I need to be finding out more about St. John's in 1893, and if there's a place where you might have been rowing a boat across the pond with some small children in it, so I can move that scene there. There's a kind of research where you just fill in the gaps to do a little research and find out what X and Y are. There's the kind of research where you might have to rewrite a scene to make it work better. But then there's the kind of gaps that are more serious. For example, in my research last night at the library, I found out that the whole section of the book that I have set in Port Union is taking place at a time when these characters could not possibly have been living in Port Union because the town was not even built yet. And that's a much more serious thing because the reason why they're living there is kind of crucial to plot and character. And so I'm either going to have to move that scene later, which is going to impact other things, a lot of other things, the whole timeline of the story, or I'm going to have to move it somewhere else, which is going to change a lot of the characters' motivations and backstory. That's the kind of thing that can happen when you just plow ahead without doing your research. You end up with big plot problems that you really have to unravel. Even so, I don't think I would change my process, and I'm not sure I could even if I wanted to, but certainly that's the type of thing that I'm dealing with now, and that's what I'm going to be doing for the next couple of months, filling in the gaps.